Good day, and welcome to another edition of One-on-One with Swope Health. I'm your host, Eric Wesson. Thanks so much for joining us today. Got a great interview planned for you today. I have joining me Dr. Wallace S. Hartsfield II. Dr. Hartsfield,
Yes, sir.
thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So, outside the obvious, where did you grow up at?
Well, right here in Kansas City, born here in Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up in the 64128 zip code over off Benton Boulevard in the Santa Fe community.
And where'd you go to school?
I actually went to Wendell Phillips in second grade and then went to a school called Loretta Academy. My father was trying to work with a group that was trying to work with the civil rights piece and see if some things would work with regards to blacks and whites. So Loretta Academy at that time was out on 124th and Warnell Road. It's presently over off of Westport Road.
You said that was, and then you left there and you went to college.
Yeah, I actually did UMKC here. I did the Conservatory of Music here, and then from here left to go to Atlanta and was there for maybe 25, 26 years, doing mostly education and some pastoring.
Conservatory of Music.
Yes. It's a school in this instance that's focused specifically on music, but the conservatory can also include drama and dance and so forth. But my major was in music, and UMKC has one of the top conservatories in the country. Yeah.
So how did you get into preaching and religion?
Oh,
Did you have a choice? First of all, let me ask you that one.
my whole life basically has been church in a sense, but I guess it was when I was 18 years old that I sensed that, at least what I believe to be a call on my life at that time. My father worked with me a little bit, and from that point forward, just kept working in the area and went and got educated and has continued to this day.
Okay. And then when you were down in Georgia teaching?
Yeah, well, when I went to Atlanta, I went first to get the Master of Divinity at Interdenominational Theological Center. That's part of the Clark Atlanta University complex. From there, I went to Emory to do PhD studies. While I was doing PhD studies at Emory, I taught at Morehouse College. And once I finished with the PhD, I did some pastoring there in Atlanta, I guess for maybe about 14, 15 years, and came back this way.
Okay. That's a great school, Morehouse.
Yes, it is.
So when you moved back here, what did you do when you moved back here, what did you start at?
I came as a consultant to Metropolitan. Actually, I didn't mention that some of the things that I was doing in addition to teaching with regards to ministry is providing consultation for churches, starting various ministries and different things like that. When I came to Kansas City, that's what I came to do some consultant work. My father was asking me or strongly suggesting to try to get me to consider coming to Metropolitan. But I knew my father and I were at different places in ministry, and I didn't know how that was going to actually work. I didn't want to disrespect him, but at the same time, there were certain things that were very important to me. For example, women in ministry was a very important piece. There's a lot of things having to do with ministry, with multicultural types of pieces. And it's not to say that Dad was totally against that, but I know that I was coming into an environment where that was a difficult topic, and I didn't want it to be difficult for him. So I came to do consultant work here at Metropolitan.
Okay. And then you wound up accepting the reins, and that's where we are today.
Yes.
So when you look around Kansas City and you see uh, many of the issues that we have, especially pertaining to violence, what are your thoughts? And do we really have a solution, or are we just chasing our tails?
Yeah, Brother Wesson, to be honest with you, it's a hard and very troubling topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Here's the way that I would respond to it, and I know that I run the risk of some persons suggesting that I'm going to be naive with the way that I will respond to this question. Obviously, I think the whole matter with regards to violence and homicides, crime within the city has a whole lot to do with at least three things: poverty, racism, and uneven development. When I Poverty, there are just certain resources that certain communities lack, and because of that, it breeds, it pushes homicide. And I definitely don't want persons to think that impoverished areas are the only areas that are dealing with crime and homicide, because we know that to be the case here in the greater Kansas City area, that we've got homicides happening everywhere. But poverty is a big driver, in my opinion, of violence that takes place. Poverty, racism is obviously there, and then the whole notion of uneven development, where certain communities just don't have the investment that other communities have. What I was saying to you, as far as what some would suggest is probably naive, I believe one solution to this is to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that quickly persons will say you can have all the prayer vigils you want and things like that. That's not changing things. Well, I have a different way of thinking about prayer. When I think about prayer, I don't think about asking God or trying to tap into some force to come and fix things that are happening within the neighborhood. To pray is to change. That is, it begins with those who are actually praying. And the question is not so much will the situation and the environments change, but will we change, or are we willing to change in the midst of the environment? And I'm not really sure we're ready to make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we are ready to take the responsibility that it's going to take in order for us to address these matters. For example, are we ready to respect one another?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're going to really have communities where violence is not going to run rampant like it is now, then there's going to have to be respect. And when I say respect, it doesn't mean that we always agree with one another, but even when we disagree, we have to make the agreement that I'll never dehumanize you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's just a basic lack of respect in our communities at all levels. And these are not just young gangbangers, these are not just youngsters. This is just in our communities. We don't respect one another. When we disagree with one another, we can't just disagree. It seems like it always moves to the point of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Respect is important, but also reconciliation. There's a lot of broken relationships in our community, and I'm not sure we're ready to mend those relationships. And especially when we talk about amongst our leaders, there are fractured relationships there, and for whatever reason, those fractures in our relationships, we allow them to stay. We never seem to address those, and we're just expecting something to get better, but we won't reconcile with one another. And finally, I think that there takes a spirit of righteousness. When I say righteousness, I'll deliver that from church talk. Righteousness just has to do with treating one another right, doing right by each other. So when I say pray, I'm talking about, are we willing in our communities to do what it takes to address the violence issue? And I'm suggesting that that can't happen until we make a commitment to respect, reconciliation, and righteousness.
So a couple of Sundays ago, we had a Sunday school lesson. I teach Sunday school at Palestine. But one of the young people, we were talking about violence. And one of the young people in my Sunday school class, I teach middle adults, and we have people that are, younger than middle adults.
Yeah.
And he said something I thought was like really profound, and I had to explain it to him. And he said that the root cause of violence is the lack of love. And so my challenge question to him was, well, what does love look like? Because to everybody in the community, if you went door to door, even though the Bible says what love is, if you look door to door, everybody would have a different definition of love.
Yeah.
And what it looks like. But I can't love you until I learn how to love myself.
Absolutely.
And you have some people in our community, women, and you got men that do it, that think love is when your spouse or significant other is going upside your head.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he's thinking that that's how he shows love, which is not love. And she's thinking that if he loves me, that this is what he does as a part of that love. So do you think that love is the cure-all?
Well, I probably should have prefaced my comments by saying that this whole matter of praying is about availing and opening ourselves to love and to be loved. And when I speak about love, I'm not speaking about necessarily at this point a romantic kind of piece.
Right.
I'm speaking about love, and that's those three things that I gave to you: respect, reconciliation, righteousness. That, in my opinion, is the way love is expressed and how we are called to treat one another. Now, I mean, specifically within the Christian tradition, I mean, but this is not just with the Christian tradition, but within Christianity, we're supposed to love God. We're supposed to love neighbor, but it doesn't stop there.
Right.
But we're also supposed to love enemy. And so this whole notion of love for God, love for neighbor, and enemy love, again, I say to pray is to open oneself to that call and be about that. And that's why I'm saying I'm not sure whether we are willing to make the commitment to respect, to reconcile, and to treat one another right. So I would agree with the young man totally that love is the way, but we need to make sure to understand what we say when we say love. Love is about treating one another right. All right. And even when, like I say, even when we don't agree, we still treat one another right.
Do you think any of it has to fall on the shoulders of nutrition? Do we have access, even in 64130 zip code areas and that area, do we have access to nutritional food? By your church, for example, you got Sunfresh there, but how long are we going to be able to keep that there?
Well, that's one of the things that I know that I was a part of in trying to address the food desert that we had here in our area, and I still think that we could do better because unfortunately we still have folks using things like Walgreens and 7-Elevens and others as grocery stores, and that's definitely not healthy.
Gas
And
stations, that's my pet peeve.
there you go. Well, I think that the whole matter of the lack of nutrition. I think that's what I was trying to say beforehand. If we want to deal with this from a more technical level, we're going to have to address, not only the poverty and the racism, but the uneven development. There are so many things in parts of our community that we lack that if you go into other communities,
Mm-hmm.
there's an abundance
Mm-hmm.
there. And until we make a commitment to evening out the development that's going on, um, we're going to be challenged. And we see that we have about 5 or 6 zip code areas that not only struggling with nutrition, but have a life expectancy of somewhere around 15 to 16 years less than other zip codes that are right next door to them.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I would say that um, nutrition, there is a connection between nutrition and violence, nutrition in health, violence and health in general. I mean, violence and jobs, violence and home or housing. I mean, it's all connected there. But many of us tend to want to say that until the government fixes that, we're not going to make that happen. Definitely, the government has a responsibility. But again, I go back to where I was beforehand. Are we open to pray?
Mm-hmm.
That is to change in the way we need to change in order that our communities change. God doesn't have to change the situation in order to change us in the situation. Our changing within the context of the situation is what makes the difference. That's where change in communities come.
So you announced, and the church announced a new initiative named after your father. So is that one of the avenues that we would look forward to seeing change? Because one of the things I heard about it was that it would be a think tank created within the initiative. So tell us about that.
Right, right. Well, basically, first of all, let me just say to you that our family, that is the Hartsfield family, we're really thankful to the community because we had nothing to do with this. These were leaders at both the local as well as national levels that said that they were interested in remembering the work of my father and continuing the legacy. Out of that was born this social justice initiative that's named after my father. Um, that kind of happened because as they were thinking about what to do at first, they were thinking about having just kind of a yearly piece that would take place where they would award people who were doing great things in the community. And I was suggesting that we have a lot of groups that are doing that right now. Here's something that I sensed from my father in his latter years. In my opinion, Dad was very frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
He was frustrated on two sides. He was frustrated on the side of issues that adversely impact, especially the African American community. And there were just a host of them, but for him, the big ones were education, economics, health, and employment. Those were kind of where he really focused. He was frustrated by how those areas continued to be degraded within the inner city. But he was also frustrated with the fact that even though we could identify the issues, we were lacking in solutions. So we could not sustain or maintain any of the work that we were doing. We would expend a lot of energy identifying the issue, but we lacked in solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And we still do that. We still do.
Yeah, and I suggested that, you know, one thing that I learned from Dad's generation is that they knew how to kick doors down.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you talk about Earl Abel or whether you talk about Brother A.L. Johnson or Dad, they knew how to kick doors down. Unfortunately, they weren't as good on in knowing how to walk through those doors. and and the generation that came after them, some of us walked through, but not enough of us walked through. So the W.S. Hartsfield Social Justice Initiative is intended to be a critical engagement of those issues that adversely or disproportionately impact, especially African American communities. Um, and in so doing, I suggested that sometimes we jump out into action too quickly before we have learned an issue. I mean, we think that just because we have a little bit of understanding, we have the answers also. But sometimes it takes time to sit with it and to develop. And the social justice initiative is not only supposed to be able to identify the issues, but to develop practical solutions where we stop doing too much talking about it and to put things into practice that work, and what does not work, stop practicing that. So that's what the initiative is about.
You know, while you were talking, I was thinking about when Reverend Hartsfield used to call me, "Now, Eric, I need you over here in my office. Let's see, you got to stop at stoplights. I need you over here in my office in 7 minutes." I was like, "Reverend Hartsfield, I'm doing something. Do we have a bad connection?" I didn't ask you if you were doing anything. I asked you to get over here in my office.
Yeah.
And he would go through what you talked about, issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so many issues, and we keep regurgitating those issues without a solution.
That's right.
You know, it's like, okay, so we know all these things. We're getting all this information. What's the solution, and how do we distribute this information so that everybody understands it? And I'll say this and let you respond. If I live in 64133 zip code area, I don't have the same issues as people that live in 64108.
That's right.
So how do I feel their pain? I got grocery stores, gas stations. Gas stations are cheaper. So how do we understand as a village, you know, even though the village is sick, how do we understand as a village that these issues affect us all?
Let me ask again, Brother Wesson. Do you think that we're ready to make a commitment to value one another the same?
No.
Well, in my opinion, where there's a lack of valuing
Mm-hmm.
of others, you're going to have issues like violence. You're going to have issues like, substandard schools and educational pieces. You're going to have lack of housing and things like that. When there's a lack of care, a genuine care for one another. I mean, for me, whether or not I'm in zip code 64133 or whether I'm in 64109 or 130, whatever, wherever I live, the question is do I care enough about you that if you don't have what you need, then we all pull together and demand that you get what you need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Until we get there, I think we're going to always struggle with it. The problem with it is that we're getting, the homicides are seeming like they are intensifying.
Right.
and more homicides. And so I pray that we don't get to a place where we accept
Hmm.
this number of homicides. But again, notice what I'm trying to say is that to pray is not to have the situation change, but to be changed in the midst of the situation. And for whatever reason, I don't think that we are open to that change. And that puts us in a strange place.
So the initiative, are you all going to have regular meetings, or how's the initiative going to look toward?
Yeah, there will be some regular meetings, but we're interested in raising money, getting uh, uh, professionals, and it does not mean that we do not value the conversation, because we need ongoing conversations happening from the community, the people who are victims of some of these issues. We value that, but we also are interested in trying to engage these issues in an organized and structured way with both professionals as well as persons who live within the community, but going after these issues in very structured ways, not just ways where we come together and I say what you're not doing, or you say what I'm not doing, whatever. But
Beat up sessions, that's what I call
right? Yeah, I mean, we will develop institutes of sorts where we organize in an organized way, go after these particular issues, look at work that has been done, all right, and go through a process of discernment where we can develop practical issues. So it will include, yes, ongoing meetings, but these meetings are not just at a local level. We're trying to do this at a larger level, something that would be like unto the Auburn School of Research, and that's what we're really trying to develop is a research school of thought, which will help us to deal with these issues in an organized and strategic way.
So put me on the mailing list so when you all have meetings, and don't have them on Thursday again. That's my press day. I can't come, but I did watch it on the YouTube video. One of your members, Dwayne Harvey, told me how I could see the replay of it. So, how can people get in touch with you if they want to get involved?
Well, they can call to Metropolitan. That's probably the quickest way. Area code 816-923-3689. My email address is whartsfield02 at gmail.com. Again, that's WHARTSFIELD, the number 02 at gmail.com.
Or they can come in the church service on Sunday and stand in the line after service and talk to you.
There's no lie. There's no lie. There's no lie. No, we would love to have you.
All right. My guest was Dr. Wallace S. Hartsfield, and he is the senior pastor at Metropolitan Missionary Baptist Church. And we're so happy to have you. And we've got to come back with round two of this discussion as the initiative moves forward.
Love to.
Love to have you here again. As always, I have the greatest viewing audience in the world. Till next week, remember, tough times don't last, tough people do. Until next time, peace.